World building is one of the key features of escapist fiction. Epic quests, grim battles, and intrepid adventures are part and parcel of sci-fi and fantasy. But what about when you want to escape to a fantastical world that makes you laugh? There are plenty of world building tricks and techniques that have a different flavor in comedic works. One might argue that the richly realized worlds of fantasy and science fiction could do with a lot more jokes about poop.
Because I'm a very cultured person.
Comedy can be light or it can be very dark, but if you want to create a convincing world, there'll be wars in its history, not to mention murders, slavery, and discrimination. A comedy will potentially take those weighty topics and mock them to death. Easy, right? Well, perhaps it's not the simplest writing trick out there. However, Adventure Time, Futurama, Discworld, all these works and more stand out as examples of settings bursting with dark elements simmering beneath the surface. Let's start with a simple example. Part 1. Setting tone. As a writer, it's worth thinking about how to set up your story so that right from the beginning your audience understands what tone your work will have. If you start with a brutal murder portrayed in a completely serious way, comedy fans may be turned off. If you start with a fart joke, people interested in darker themes may get bored. Try to incorporate different aspects of your work right from the beginning. Episode 2 of the Adventure Time spin-off Fiona and Cake sets the tone for that particular episode by opening with the protagonist Simon hiding with Marcy as monstrous oozes hunt them down. Simon's first line, "Wow, that's a nice sewer we're in," opening the episode with a joke. This immediately establishes both the show's post-apocalyptic setting and its wry and goofy humor. In Futurama's first episode, Fry meets the show's breakout character Bender at Stop and Drop, America's favorite suicide booth since 2008. Fry thinks it's a phone booth he can use to call his only living relative, and accidentally sets Slow and Horrible as his mode of death. So we know right from the beginning this will be a wacky show making fun of corporations, social problems, and idiots. Now obviously you may want to push the envelope. BoJack Horseman was deliberately set up to appear like a run-of-the-mill adult cartoon set in a world of wacky talking animals.
I was kind of surprised because I didn't think ahead, and if I did, I would not have been surprised by the reaction of people watching the first couple episodes and being like, oh, I get this, and then turning it off.
While this tactic seems to have lost them some viewers, the show was successful in the end, hailed as a groundbreaking adult animation. So as with any creative rule, sometimes it's there to be broken. It's arguably simpler to set the tone if your work is relatively light and goofy. For example, the web cartoon Homestar Runner and related media tends to be goofy and surreal from start to finish. The last thing you'd want to do with a light-hearted comedic work is start with a grim melodramatic scene, unless you're parodying that type of story. Regardless, having a joke that sets the tone of your story right at the beginning is a useful trick, but you can be more ambitious. Other comedic works start with a joke idea that does more than set up tone. It sets out the weird rules of the setting. The first episode of the anime Spy Family opens with the violent assassination of 2 Western diplomats. Then it introduces the West's most renowned spy, gathering proof that an Eastern politician wears a toupee. As it turns out, a fake head of hair is serious business in this setting. An Eastern agent literally kills one of his subordinates over that toupee. Also in the episode's beginning, the greatest spy of the fictional nation of Vestalis is informed of his next mission: to acquire a wife and child in 7 days in order to infiltrate the social circle of Eastern extremist Donovan Desmond. So right at the beginning, we have a setting where espionage is ridiculously over the top. This is a core part of the appeal of Spy Family as a show, and the dominant feature of most of the episodes. An even more extreme example is the Dwarvish War that almost broke out over the fat minds of Uberwald in Terry Pratchett's best-selling Discworld series. The Discworld setting features a fantasy world carried on the back of 4 elephants, which in turn stand on the top of a turtle swimming through space. The novel The Fifth Elephant concerns an elephant that once was the 5th support for the world. It slipped off the turtle, crashed onto the Discworld, and sunk into the ground to create vast deposits of fat that the dwarves still mine and sell to this day. Now, the war itself wasn't about fat mines as such. It was simply one place where the plotting and scheming of dwarvish political factions occurred. Regardless, these examples show you can create serious conflict from absolutely absurd elements. You can go as goofy as you like and still have a compelling story with a fleshed out world. Part 2. Characters. Characters are often seen as the most important part of a fictional work, and there is reason for that. Strong and sympathetic or intriguing characters can capture our attention even in stories where the plot is a little flimsy, but there's another side to it. In fantasies like The Lord of the Rings, key aspects of the story setting are often represented in the main characters, as we see with Gandalf the Wizard, Legolas the Elf, Gimli the Dwarf, and Aragorn the heir to the throne of Gondor, among other things. It's no different in a work like Futurama. In Futurama, we're constantly reminded of the fact that New York is full of aliens thanks to the alien character Zoidberg being on the main cast. The world of robots is tied directly to the protagonists thanks to the robot character Bender, and humanity's colonization of other planets is constantly at the forefront of our minds thanks to Amy Wong, heiress to a filthy rich family of Martian colonists. Having never seen Futurama before, you can start with any episode and immediately realize that this will be a show with jokes about robots, aliens, and human colonization of other planets. It's also possible to tie your world building to the perspective of a key character in order to accentuate the themes underlying your comedy. In The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Arthur Dent is a great focus character for the series' theme of the chaos, unpredictability, and absurdity of the universe. Arthur, an exceedingly ordinary Englishman, fond of his everyday routines and quiet life, serves as a foil to the madness of the galaxy. He is a great foil to a universe full of corrupt politicians, absurd corporations, and affable hedonists. Incidentally, in our main cast we have Zaphod Beeblebrox, the corrupt former president of the galaxy, Ford Prefect, the affable hedonist, and Marvin, a creation of the profitably incompetent Sirius Cybernetics Corporation. These characters set the stage for the series' absurdist satire, but satire can be approached from a different direction. Beyond representing aspects of a setting or society, characters can serve as a focal point for exploration of complex themes. Let's use the Discworld writer Terry Pratchett as an example here. Pratchett can pump out good jokes like any of the best humour writers. He doesn't let that get in the way of his character's practical sense of morality. By way of contrast, Douglas Adams, author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, might have one of his protagonists accept the destruction of an entire planet just to facilitate the setup of a joke. Not to criticise, I love Douglas Adams. Pratchett's main characters always act based on consistent, if naturally evolving, moral worldviews. A great example of this is the Discworld novel Guards, a story about kings and dragons, good and evil, justice and villainy. The tale begins with Carrot Iron Founderson arriving in the city of Ankh-Morpork to join the Watch and enforce the law. Ankh-Morpork is hardly in a golden age. Justice is mostly dispensed by organized crime groups. Carrot is astoundingly selfless and straightforward. His first move as a watchman is to do his civic duty and arrest the head of the Thieves Guild. He didn't get the memo that their business was sanctioned by the city, you see. Later on in the story, Carrot even arrests a dragon. Policing in Ankh-Morpork has become a disreputable profession. Through Carrot, it's about to get its reputation back. Now let's consider a stranger example for a moment. The cult anime Bobobo-bo is possibly the most surreal piece of entertainment I have ever seen. The show focuses on a key team, Bobobo, Don Patch, and Beauty. Bobobo is a warrior fighting against the Hare Hunt troops, a villainous group who want to make the whole world bald. Don Patch is a narcissistic attention seeker, whereas Beauty is easily surprised and relatively down to earth. The show is truly bizarre, featuring multiple episodes where Bobobo and Don Patch partially turn into birds, a storyline where Bobobo and Don Patch see an advertised job that involves hunting Bobobo and apply for the role, episodes where Bobobo takes his enemies into a separate universe that he happens to control. I'm barely scratching the surface here. What is remarkable is that for all the bizarre events that occur in the show, the main characters are extremely consistent. Bobobo and Don Patch will surprise Beauty with their unpredictable behavior, Don Patch will try to keep the spotlight on him, Beauty will call out all the weird nonsense, and Bobobo will aim to defeat or at least confuse any foe who dares to challenge him. And we see something similar in Homestar Runner, where the setting itself can be odd to the point of incoherence, but the audience is attached to the characters who remain consistent. No matter what happens, Homestar will remain goofy and optimistic, his rival Strongbad will be sarcastic and cantankerous, and so on. So with clearly defined characters, you can really get away with the most ridiculous world you can imagine. And that brings us to the final topic, ridiculous ideas. Part 3, Ridiculous Ideas. Often world building is described as a way to give a setting depth by considering in detail how things might play out if dragons were real, wizards ruled the world, and so on. But world building can serve another purpose. In comedy, world building can be a way to take a ridiculous idea and milk it for all it's worth. Take the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Over the course of the series, we learn bits and pieces about this giant company. They built Marvin the paranoid android, they try to convince people their products are fun, despite the fact that they're anything but, and their complaints department covers all the major land masses of the first 3 planets in the Sirius Tau star system. This is not so much about creating a realistic setting as it is about creating a fictional punching bag Douglas Adams can use to relentlessly mock corporations. Another example from the same series is the Vogons, small-minded bureaucrats who torture their victims by reading poetry to them. Now obviously I've never met aliens, so maybe somewhere out in the depths of space there is a species like this. But the Vogons are another example of Adams taking a ridiculous idea and having as much fun with it as possible. The opposite of the advice writers often get to go for realism in world building. Going back to the dwarves in Discworld, they don't just work in fat mines, they bake pastries that are so hard and inedible that they can be used as weapons or as the throne of their king. This is the great thing about comedic world building. You have a license to have as much fun with it as possible. So to recap, 1. Set the tone. Right from the beginning, if the audience can see the kind of world you're creating, whether it's darkly humorous or goofily surreal, you have a solid foundation from which you can expand your world building with your individual brand of humor. 2. Character is key. Your characters are your audience's best key to understanding the world you are creating. If you'll be making a lot of jokes about politicians, it will be helpful to have a character who is at least interested in politics. If robots are key to your world, a robot protagonist gives your audience a reason to be invested in the most important aspects of your world. 3. Ridiculous ideas are glorious. When you combine comedy with fantasy or sci-fi, you have the potential for limitless creativity. Your world building can be ridiculous and still be good. Embrace absurdity. I hope you enjoyed this video discussing how speculative fiction can benefit from more poop jokes among other things. If you did, you can help the channel by liking and subscribing, and thank you to those of you who've subscribed already. Have a great week and thank you for watching!